Welcome to our video recap of Operation Last Refuge Sporecloud, a 6-hour continuous play airsoft scenario hosted by the Storm Riders in partnership with Frontline Action. Sporecloud was our second and final airsoft event hosted in October 2023, and it was a direct sequel to our previous game. Following the Red Team's victory in securing both the area as well as the loyalty of the villagers and the local scientist, Red was able to secure a base of operations in the village with the goal of using the villagers to help harvest the Agaricus tempestatis fungus, or AT fungus, and process it into powerful combat stimulants. The blue team, having lost the field, would be relegated to guerrilla tactics and hit-and-run warfare to try and disrupt the Red operation as much as possible. The main objective was for Red to harvest fungus samples from one of two locations, here and here, then bring those samples back to the scientist in the village to process it into a shipment. Those shipments could be stored on the field in a secure location, or brought to an extraction point here. Doing the latter would expose the shipment to potential raids from Blue Team, but if successful would score permanent points for Red. The Blue Team would be outnumbered by the Red Team, but were given special access to move around the outside of the usual field limits, and had special medics that would allow them to revive more than once. With the use of stealth, Blue would be able to surprise Red by attacking them from many different angles, and despite being outnumbered overall, would have enough resources to sustain themselves long enough to take their objectives and escape. At the start of the game, the Red Team were given the task to get their villagers to the fungus harvesting points, but the team decided to take some time to reinforce and modify the village defenses before setting out. This allowed the Blue Team to start moving on the field completely unopposed. Setting out from their spawn area in the parking lot, Blue squads started moving south through the wooded outskirts of the field. Since the Red Team had not yet taken to the field, the Blue Team was able to use clearer, more open paths without being spotted. Within the first half hour of the game, several Blue squads had made their way completely behind the village and in position to start attacking. Meanwhile, the Red Team still had not left the village to start harvesting fungus. The Blue Team had been given 2 intelligence gathering missions at the onset of the game to identify key components of the fungus harvesting operation, including locating the scientist, which they were easily able to complete as part of their movement on the field. Once they got into position behind the village, the first firefight erupted, shortly before the first hour had elapsed. Blue Squad started shooting into the village, causing a mass response from the Red Team. This would effectively delay the Red Team from being able to start acquiring victory points, though at increased cost to the Blue Team, which had both squads eventually be wiped out and perform a Redcon withdrawal to their staging area. At this point in the video, it's probably worth mentioning a small logistical constraint. As you can imagine, it was not easy to get much video footage of the Blue Team without blowing their cover, since both the camera operator as well as the drone were extremely visible to the Red Team. So we made the decision to only shoot the Blue Team when it wouldn't be detrimental to them, either because their presence was already known or because they were at their respawn. So apologies for the lack of Blue Team video. The Red Team would eventually start getting their villagers in place and start producing fungus samples for the scientist, but not before the Blue Team could conduct a few more hit-and-run raids, earning them an early lead. The Blue Team was able to sneak into Red's secure sample storage facility and ruin 2 batches that were ready to ship, negating all the limited progress they had accomplished up until that point. Additionally, the scientist's lab exploded while he was processing a sample. The scientist wasn't harmed, but the sample was destroyed, and the cleanup effort prevented him from working on any new samples for the next half hour. After 2.5 hours, the score was 4-0 in favor of Blue. It was time for Red to go on the offensive and start exploiting the rest of the field. Rather than continuing to use all their forces to repel the Blue forces on the D-Day bunkers, Red sent some of their forces, along with a villager, to their harvesting point in the little village. Red was also able to escort a villager to identify a third potential harvesting point. Using their numerical advantage in this way meant that they were able to whittle down the Blue numbers, while starting to accumulate samples and potential victory points. Around the halfway mark of the day, both Blue squads had been eliminated and Redconned back to their spawn. They took that opportunity to reload, eat some food, drink water, and just recharge their energy. Unfortunately for them, the red team quickly realized that there were no blue squads left on the field and used the opportunity to move across the entire field and take control of both main entrances, effectively pinning them inside their spawn. The break the blue team took went on for quite a while, so long that both game control and the red commander started to get concerned that something was wrong. But we confirmed that that was not the case and they just needed the extra time, so the game continued. The red team was able to get on the scoreboard and complete 3 shipments, scoring 6 points during this downtime. After the 4th hour, the score had now shifted to 6-4 in favor of red. Given the advanced red positions, the blue team was forced to move even deeper through the woods on the outskirts of the field. While this was a bit slower for them, they were able to snake their way onto the field with 2 clear objectives. Firstly, deploying an EMP communication scrambler near the red position. This would cause confusion on the red team and force players to retreat to the village. Secondly, and most challenging, trying to abduct the scientists from the village during that confusion. Blue was able to sneak a squad in and plant the EMP device as planned. Using a diversion from other team members, the blue squad was able to sneak in and plant the device completely unnoticed, which was a job well done by them and earned them another 2 victory points. Once the EMP device went off, red forces were made to pull back to the village, but not before they were able to complete 1 other shipment. This meant that going into the last hour of the game, the score was 9-6 in favor of red. At this point, Matt, the red team commander, made a clever decision that we had not foreseen in the game planning. He realized that since he was already ahead, and the main way that blue had been able to score points had been to disrupt their shipments, he made the decision to stop creating any new shipments and just sit on all the ones they had prepared until the last possible moment to score them right at the end. The only way that the blue team would be able to have a competitive finish would be to intercept and destroy those shipments, as well as to now assassinate or capture the scientists, which ultimately was the final mission that was assigned to them. At this point, the game really degenerated into a smattering of engagements all over the field, as blue desperately tried to find any possible way to split the red forces up. But with the red team solidly defending the village and with larger numbers, it was an uphill struggle for them. In an effort to give blue one final chance, and to split the red forces a bit, the scientist was tasked with leaving his lab and going for a short walk in the woods to relieve himself. This would be the perfect moment for blue to grab or assassinate him. Unfortunately for blue, although they were aware the scientist was leaving his post, they were unable to move their forces quickly enough to take advantage of that opportunity, and the scientist returned to his lab unharmed. With 20 minutes left, the red forces managed to push back into the D-Day bunkers to try and cut off blue's attack from the south side of the field. This would push blue further into the woods and away from the village, and with about 10 minutes left, the final nail in the coffin came when red was able to score 1 final shipment, bringing the final score to 12-7 for red. Despite a challenging start and early setbacks, red was ultimately able to come back and secure a solid win, thanks to some clever strategy from their commander and an unfortunately timed break by blue. Overall, the event was well received and the feedback from players was positive, with a few key points for improvement that are worth mentioning for those of you considering running your own event of this type. First of all, this was the first time our community had ever tried a game where teams had different rules for moving around on the field and respawning. Despite doing everything we could to help players understand the rules before the game, this still led to some confusion during the day. If you're attending an event like this, you really need to read the rules ahead of time. Secondly, having the blue team's primary method of scoring points tied to disrupting red's shipments, while fine in theory, fell down once red decided to try to stop scoring points. This forced us to come up with new missions for the blue team to help them score points, but those missions became much harder for blue to achieve since red's forces no longer had to protect their operations and could focus solely on controlling the field with their higher numbers. Blue would have had to be much more coordinated and deliberate, which is challenging towards the end of the day when your players are already pretty tired. Finally, sometimes as a game organizer, you just need to let certain situations play out. A few times throughout the day, a team would start to get bogged down or stuck, and it was very tempting to jump in and throw that team a bone. In some cases that did happen, such as when we gave blue additional missions towards the end, But in other cases, we decided to just sit back and let the teams figure it out. It's important to be attentive and consider how acting to favor one team over the other will affect the game and the experience of the players. Sometimes trying to resolve your own problem, even if you ultimately fail, is more satisfying and a better emergent gameplay experience than feeling like the solution was given to you by game control. Ultimately, Operation Last Refuge Sporecloud was a success and both teams had a lot of fun. Congratulations to the red team and commiserations to the blue team. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.